Hello. I know it has been quite a while since we've had a video of any sort of major length on the channel. These sort of things can be a little much to do while I'm trying to crank stuff out. It takes a lot to set up the camera and think of angles and whatnot, but today we have some really cool stuff to do. I've been kind of requested a few times to show some of these processes, and specifically requested to show how I did this pen that I'll somewhere on screen in editing put a picture of. It's going to be made out of, well, this one that I did already that is sold and been shipped to a customer is made out of Ziricote wood, Ebonite, brass, and Abalone. So this is going to be a fun one for sure. And yeah, we'll kind of dive into how I make these pens. A lot of the process here is going to be similar to the Osage orange wood and teal resin pen that I made a little while back, but obviously with some additional processes to get some of these elements included into the pen. So to start, I think what we will do is start with sections. They're generally the kind of simplest overall, and it'll get us kind of warmed up on the lathe and good and going. So we'll set a couple things aside. Actually, first, let's go over the pieces that we have. I have this beautiful piece of Ziricote right here. You can see some really nice kind of medullary ray flecking in there. The kind of spiderweb veining is looking really nice. I am seeing some cracking on this blank, so I'm hoping it doesn't shatter too much, but it's mostly on these ends that we won't be using much anyway. The other blank that we have for the other customer is this one. A little bit less of that spider webbing, but a ton of flecking on this side. A little bit of like a lace pattern on this side as well. So these should be some really nice pieces of wood. Black Japanese ebonite, which, just a nice solid material to use. And then this stuff is pre-cut abalone strip, and it is real abalone, but it's already been cut to a width and has a little adhesive backing on it to help make that inlay process a little bit easier. It is still fiddly and tedious because this stuff breaks very easily, and if you can, it's nice to control where the breaks happen so you can kind of have a good uniform look, but it is very difficult to do. It's a very fragile material. So we will kick off with setting aside our brass, and that's just brass. You know what that is. That's metal. Our wood, and then we'll start with one of our rods of ebonite. I don't know if I'm going to need all of this for these two pens. I imagine I'm going to need most of this. These are both fully lined, which means you're using almost a full pen's worth of material for the lining part of the pen. So it's a little bit of work. All right. So for these sections, we're going to be doing a segmented section with one brass accent. And for that brass accent, I'll be using this stuff. This is, I think, like 26 or 28 gauge brass. It's 0.33 millimeters, 0.35 millimeters thick. The other stuff that I'll be using is about a 0.5 millimeter thick, so 24 gauge. For the section accents, I'll usually do something a little bit thinner than the body accents, just because, this section itself is thinner. You can go a little bit more dainty on that. I also, this is the last of the this stuff that I have currently, and I'll be moving to that, and it just kind of works out that way. So we'll set that to the side for now. We don't need it right this second. And we do need our 3/4 inch collet so that we can get this guy chucked up. I typically cut about 35 millimeters worth for my sections. I then use an 8 millimeter or so tenon for the threads, and that leaves me usually around 25 to 27, depending on how accurate I've been for the overall section length. I enjoy something longer like that. 30 is a length that I've done in the past, but it can get a little cap heavy for the overall design when you start to get that long of a section, or the pen itself just gets kind of exorbitantly long. At the moment, my pens are already pushing the capacity of a lot of cases in terms of length. So I've settled on that, 26 or so millimeter overall length for the section itself. So we'll start with a 35 millimeter piece. I've actually forgotten how nice it is to have a nice fresh Sharpie with a kind of tinty tip. All right, I know I've showed this in other videos with the warning, if you will, that it's probably not recommended. If you are not careful, you could hurt yourself. Turning is all about, well, life in general is all about managing the risks that you are willing to take. So this method of cutting my blanks is one that I'm comfortable with, and it is the best way I have found to get nice straight cuts and reduce the amount of material used to make one of these pens, or amount of material wasted in cutting my bits apart. The first couple times I cut something that way, I was, just blowing through it the middle and kind of surprising myself. Over time, as I've done this more, you kind of get used to how things sound and can transition to grabbing the waste piece so that you don't lose bits and have things falling all over the place. But I found that's a nice kind of efficient way to use material and not waste a whole lot and get a nice fairly straight cut here. This still needs to be faced off with a tool, but it's a good way to do things, in my opinion. All right, next up, we are going to be drilling a 6 millimeter pilot hole in here so that we can do a 10 millimeter tenon. This is one of the few things that I do use my tenon cutter for. I do use it on just about every pen for two things: the section tenon and the body tenon for where the threads are going to go. Everything else, finials and whatnot, I do generally turn those tenons by hand. Now, for this particular one, part of the reason I like to use the tenon cutter is it's a decent application for getting a long tenon here. This is what we're going to be using. How we're going to be constructing this section is we will make an extra long 10 millimeter wide tenon that will give us some space to add our brass with a 10 millimeter hole in the middle, and then we'll take another piece of ebonite and drill a 10 millimeter hole in that, and then slide that over, and that will kind of sandwich that brass in there, give us that accenting. The nice thing about doing it that way is you still have one continuous piece of ebonite through the section, so you're not having to worry about like butt joints holding together or anything like that, or adding additional not dimensional, what's a diameter clearance to be able to like slide pieces together in there. So yeah, this is my preferred method of doing things. You can turn this tenon by hand if you would like, but I found using the tenon cutter is pretty decent for this. So we have 35 millimeters. I want 8 millimeter tenon, and then we'll go maybe like 11 millimeters in before we hit that accent point. Usually I'll go like 2 or so passes with the tailstock locked down for this pilot hole, just to get us a good solid start, and then I'll usually start pecking it with it unlocked. This is another one you do want to be kind of careful with, pecking it like this on something short, because once we do start getting deeper and towards that end, if you do break through with the tailstock unsecured, this V-bit will pull itself through. So once I get a little closer to the end, I do go back to locking it down. But we're still just kind of pecking. And then we're through. All right. I believe this is still set up from doing some sections before. Double check. If it is, excellent. Although, you will actually need to move it anyway because we're doing a long tenon here. So we have, what did I say, 20 or 19? Yeah, 19 millimeters, and I don't think that depth will be enough. Yeah, we're actually really close. So I think what we'll do is we'll leave it right here. We'll double check that this is set for 10 mil. It is. We will go ahead and run this like this as far as it's going to go. And then we can finish that last like millimeter, it looked like, by hand. Alright, so as you can see, we're very close to our line there. That's going to make it really easy to just turn this up and go like this. And then we will also go ahead and just double check our diameter. Perfect 9.9. Let's go. Alright. So, next. Alright, for now we're going to cut the camera. This is good enough for the moment. I'm going to go ahead and knock out another one of these off camera really quick, and then we will go on to getting this stuff prepped for putting onto here. So, we'll catch you guys in just a second. Okay, we're back. So we've got two mostly identical little section blank starts. And I did already punch the holes in my brass, but I'll just go over how I do that. It's super duper simple. Oh, that's what that was. Awesome. Hold up. Beautiful. Okay, cool. So to do the brass here, initially I was drilling holes in the brass, and it's a pain in the ass to do because these thin sheets need to be clamped securely on like every side basically for them to not just grab the V-bit and just tear up basically. So you can drill your holes in the brass, but you need to have a couple sacrificial blocks that you clamp together with the brass in between, and then you drill your hole through. It's kind of a pain to line that up, and in my shop setup here currently, it was a pain to actually do the drilling as well. So I did end up getting this guy, which is a 4 to 20 millimeter punch set, and this just uses these little steel cylinders that are kind of sharp on the edge to punch a hole in the metal. You basically just cut your little piece, you slide it between these two and kind of line things up, and then you'll put this down in, smack it with a hammer, and then kind of tap it back out with some sort of other smaller bit. And that will allow these guys to slide on to there. So the next thing we'll do, which I probably won't record because it's, you guys know how to drill holes and stuff, is I will cut 10 millimeter wide or 10 millimeter long pieces of Ebonite. I will drill a 10 millimeter wide hole in them, and then those will slide over here and we will glue everything together. I will show you guys how I do that once we get to that point, because I've found when you're cutting the brass, I use snips like this, and it always bends it at least a little bit. You can kind of flatten it out with a hammer or something, but that tends to like deform your hole and then you have to ream it out. So what I've started doing is I'll cut my brass to a reasonable size, then I'll flatten it as best as I can, and then I'll punch the hole. And then when you're gluing things up and you have these two nice flat square surfaces, ideally, what we can do is clamp things very hard to basically flatten this brass back out. I found it works decently well. The problem that you run into with these guys and having a 10 millimeter piece here is you then have your tenon sticking out still. So what I have, if it's down here, no, it's upstairs where I do my gluing. What I have is just an old failed section that didn't end up working that has a 10 millimeter hole in it. I was working on a number 8 nib, and that had a 10 millimeter hole deep enough into it that I can use that as a clamping caul for doing this. So I will show you guys that here in just a moment once I get these last pieces for the sections all ready to go. Like I said, 10 millimeter long piece, 10 millimeter hole down the middle. You guys should be able to figure that out. I don't think you need to see it. All right, we're back. We have two completed glue ready section glue ups ready to go. I told you guys I would show you that clamping caul. This is just a failed section. I made the pieces to take a number 6 and then accidentally messed something up and decided to try to make it a number 8, and then that just caused other issues. So it's perfect for what I use it for now. It's almost impossible to get a clamp around this piece so that we can squish these two together and make sure that we have a nice tight glue joint and that our brass gets as flat as we can possibly get it. You know, it may be ideal to take the time to use a jeweler's saw rather than snips for this, but you get enough clamping pressure to be able to flatten this in my experience. So I'd rather just, snip it out and save the time. But what we have here is there's basically a perfect 10 millimeter hole here. What I will do is I'll get everything all glued, make sure that I really wipe this area down well with some rubbing alcohol, and then I will spray this with mold release for like an epoxy. And then you clamp things together like that, and this will give you the clamping pressure around that tenon. So I'm gonna go get these guys glued up, and we will move on to starting with probably our body liners. So we'll start on that and get you guys in just one more moment. Bam. Okay. Next up, we will be starting with our bodies. This is going to be a fully lined pen, which means the entire body and entire cap is going to have Ebonite encasing the converter and the nib section area. So we are essentially going to be making an Ebonite pen that we're going to, turn down very far and then sleeve some wood over and do some inlaying on. So the first thing that we're going to do here is cut ourselves some 80 millimeter blanks. And where do we get that number from? Well, the mandrel that I use for the body is the Turner's Warehouse stainless steel mandrel. It is an M10 by 1 thread right here, and we have approximately 76 millimeters to the end of the section support there, or the body support there. So what I generally do is give myself a couple extra millimeters on the end so that I don't accidentally blow through. And we have some room for support while we're turning the outer diameter of our sleeve. So that's the first thing that we will start with here is an 80 millimeter section of Ebonite, which we will then drill and thread just like we were going to turn that into a pen by itself. Then we'll throw it on the mandrel and we will shape the outside for sticking it into the wood. So if you've watched my Osage orange and teal resin video, then this is a very familiar process. So a lot of this is going to be sped up if I have not been speeding things up already. And yeah, we will get started with 80 millimeters. Before we cut this, I'm going to double check this length. Beautiful. So we can get both of our body blanks out of this one piece of Ebonite before having to jump into this big guy for the rest of it. So that's going to be awesome. All right, so yeah, we'll be drilling our 6 millimeter pilot hole, hitting things with the tenon cutter, and then we'll drill out the rest of this with 8 millimeter, 9 millimeter, and then I have started, after cracking a couple of body tenons recently, I have started doing about a 1 millimeter, 10 millimeter wide little recess right at the very front of the body where the threads are. Mainly because of the way that these mandrels are designed. There's a little bit of an area where you need extra clearance right at the very shoulder here. And I've found that if I don't do that 10 millimeter for about 1 millimeter deep, then I have to do kind of a lot of hand opening right there, and it's never quite consistent. And like I said, I've cracked a couple of threaded areas and had to turn things back and waste a little material on a couple of previous pens. So I will show that when we come to it, but just a little overview of the process. We will be swapping out this guy for a 6 and getting going. Now for pilot holes in the body of the pen. I do usually do the full depth. I can actually bring this back a little bit. For the pilot hole in the body, I'll usually start with the tailstock locked down, and then I'll loosen it up and peck it in and out. This is a little less precarious than doing the section through hole that way, because we're not going through this piece. We are just going up to the end of this piece, or near to the end of this piece with this bit. So yeah, once we get about 10 to 15 millimeters deep, then I'll start just kind of pecking in and out with this loose. I've just found it's a little bit more time efficient that way. It results in just as straight a hole as long as you get things started properly. So. I've been doing 7mm tenons for my body threads. I find that gives me, I like the look of a little bit more threaded area, but I don't like how it feels to need to spin the pen 10 times to get the cap on and off. So I do inset my threads a little bit so the cap slides onto them about halfway before they start to engage, and then they engage the rest of the way. That little chamfer right on the front just helps the die get started on there. Take that guy out. This guy out. And then this is a triple lead cap and die set that I'm using for this. I do like to go through all of the leads individually when I'm doing the threading. Get rid of our gunk and clean that up just a touch. There we go. Then a lot of the time I'll just kind of kiss it with the tool just to smooth things out a little bit. Alright, next up we go down 8mm wide with this guy down to around 76mm deep. The Turner's Warehouse Mandrel has about an 8mm wide support tenon, I guess you could call it, on there, and so we need something that'll fit close to that, and this is perfect. And once we have a hole already and we're boring rather than just straight drilling, I always stop the lathe before putting the drill bit back in. If you don't, and you go in a little bit too quickly and the bit can bite, it will want to pull itself in. We don't drill that pilot hole as deep as this hole needs to go. So we have reached the depth of the pilot hole. We've passed that, and so we are drilling full depth now, which means we can more safely do things this way. And that should be good for the 8 mil. We'll go ahead and do 9 millimeter next. And this goes just a touch deeper than the threads. The reason being, the cap, about the first like 4 millimeters or so, doesn't cut full depth threads. So we need this to go deep enough so that the section can go all the way in, and more importantly, that the mandrel can go all the way in. I'm probably going to end up getting some slightly modified mandrels at some point, but for now we need to make sure that this can screw in far enough, and so we have to leave a little bit of extra depth than I would necessarily like for as deep as my section panels go. And then lastly, we go literally like 1 millimeter deep with this guy, just to give ourselves that full clearance on the very end of the mandrel. Just wanted to double check and make sure that we were still recording, and we are, so keep moving on. The next step here is going to be turning this guy down so that I will be able to go into the wood. I could use a dial indicator to dial these things in. Would it technically be ideal? Yes. Is a wood lathe an accurate enough tool for me to feel the need to do that? Not necessarily. I've not had really issues with accuracy with a teeny little bit of wobble here. For the most part, you can kind of eyeball it to where it is close enough, and there's no way to, like, on some builds, you get small enough or thin enough wall thicknesses that it will matter. On something like this, it's not going to. The tiny little bit of wobble that this mandrel currently has at the end is not going to move things off enough for anything to pop through the wood at any point, partly because we are going to be truing this to the mandrel. So even if there's a little bit of wobble down in the very end here, it's not going to be something that is going to impact the feel or use of the pen, or is something that if I weren't telling you right now that there's a little bit of wobble in here, that you would notice in the end product. Now, would I love everything to be perfect and within, less than 1/1000th of an inch or, 1/100th of a millimeter? Sure. But is it necessary? Not really. So, right now we are going to turn this down. I need to decide where we are going to stop our Ebonite and start our inlay portions, as well as where along here we want to transition from a 10 millimeter to a 12 millimeter diameter. Because I do like to have as much thickness here as I can, but we have an 8 millimeter hole. If we do a 10 millimeter max outer diameter here, we'll still have a whole millimeter of wall thickness, which is plenty for Ebonite to be very strong. So first step, as you can see, after we get this guy out, the first step here is going to be flattening off this end. And this is not something that I was able to do until I got these Turner's Warehouse stainless steel mandrels, because these have a really good stiffness to them. my previous homemade Delrin mandrels would not have allowed me to have a body freestanding like this and then work on this end. You do still get a little bit of wobble. It's not, 100% stiff, but it's stiff enough. And actually, you know what? The easier way to do this is to continue to work on this end as is. You're going to hear a lot of squealing because this is going to chatter. But it's a lot easier to do it this way than to try to work around this and get to 10 millimeter with this tool. And this tool is the one that I am most comfortable with, so that's what we're using. But yeah, we will turn a 9.9-ish millimeter tenon on here. And we're not going super far with it. We're mainly just going to go to the width of the tool. I know we're not there yet, but I always like to start checking as we get sort of close. I went a little smaller there than I would like. I went a little far. One little hump, otherwise we're good there. I will. So, usually you don't want chatter, and I don't like that this is chattering as much as it is. However, one of the kind of benefits of it is it does rough up your surface and make for a better glue joint down inside. So I'm not always upset about it in this particular instance, but it does kind of suck still to have that. It makes for kind of a butt pucker in time, so it's not my favorite still. Now, I think what I want to do is probably only about 8 or 7 millimeters of exposed ebonite right here. Yeah, let's go 7 millimeters here. So we will mark this. Double check. Yep, so we'll be coming up to that line. And we're going to, I think, start with some 12, get all of this down to 12 millimeter, and then we can bring this 10 millimeter up a little ways. The main reason we're coming down to 10 millimeter here is just to give us some extra meat in the wood for doing our tapering. I don't usually do it, but I went ahead and did some little ribs here just to kind of help with glue adhesion. I usually scuff this with some low grit sandpaper for a similar reason. So this one should be all good to go to kind of get started with the next bit of the process, which will be gluing things up. I will show you guys. Let's actually, yeah, I'm going to do the entirety what we need to do for this body before I move on to the next one, and we will just kind of knock things out all in a row there. So first things first, what I'll do is, just so I don't forget, the usual way that I do this is to just take some 150 grit and just hold it in place and rotate. That will give you some length or radial deep scratches that will hopefully give the epoxy that we use a little bit more to hold on to. That's the same idea as these little hits with the corner of the tool, just to give the epoxy something to, a little something extra to grip. Before we continue, I'm going to cut the camera for just a moment just to kind of reset things. I'm going to clean up a little bit and get set up for the next part of the process. So we'll see you guys in just a moment. Okay, so we have 4 bits of brass punched and ready to go with 12mm holes for doing these guys here. Now, yeah, they're a little warped. So, like we were discussing with the sections, we'll have to use some clamping pressure to make sure that these guys are nice and flat on there. But we'll get that done. So, the next step is to make our spacers so that these guys will stay properly spaced when we go to glue everything up. So to do that, I'm going to use some of this leftover demonstrator resin that I have from another project, and we'll get that chucked up and show you how we do these little rings for spacers, or how I do these little rings for spacers. So we'll get our 3/4 inch lips. I like to give this a quick little brush off before putting the nut back on. And this guy's going to go in here and get clamped with kind of as much sticking out as we can. And we'll probably do a little fiddling here just to get this running as true as possible. That looks like it's probably pretty solid. So what we're gonna do is actually face this off first real quick. And that will actually probably help with seeing if we are in a good spot there. Yeah, we are close enough to true there. We can swap this for a drill chuck and get this drilled out. So what we're going to do is first start by drilling a 12mm hole a little bit deeper into this. In fact, I think I'm just going to go a 12mm hole all the way through the rest of this piece of resin. That should be fine. So we're a little off, but all right. So currently we have a 12mm hole through there, which means we can just slide that guy in and we're good to go. But we don't want this long. We want a little 4mm ring. So this is the most tedious part about this build, is making these little guys, because we really want to be accurate with these. We want these to be basically exactly 4mm in width. If they're a hair under, it's not the end of the world, because a lot of the times you get a little bit of extra width from the glue being stuck between the two pieces. However, we want this as close as we possibly can get it to exactly 4mm. So, and how do we achieve that? Well, we are going to use our little jeweler's saw for this, but we're going to swap this 12 for like a 7.5 or 7mm bit. Pull this guy back, and then we're going to do that. That way, when this comes off, we don't lose it, because I have lost one before. All right, so the jeweler saw has an exceptionally delicate thin blade, which is great for getting basically zero kerf. However, we do have to be careful with it because it is fairly fragile and it's easy to break. And this one, we're not going to do any sawing motion or anything. We are just going to let those little teeth do their work. And we're through. Now, the kind of issue is when we get down to that end bit, it's always going to be real rough right here. So, and this is where the tediousness kind of comes into play. I think what I'm going to do is clean this up really fast and do one more of these just to make things easy on myself. And then when we do go to our caps, we'll be doing this exact same process. But what we'll do is we'll take them off of this 12 millimeter inner diameter bit, and then we'll actually drill these little guys out. Maybe. We'll have to see. See if I decide that it's better to do it one way or the other. All right. Now, it doesn't really matter if this stuff kind of looks nice inside or not. This resin is not for being seen. This is literally just a spacer for us to be able to keep our brass bits properly aligned when we glue things up. And then what we usually like to see is it being like just a tiny bit wider than 4 millimeter, giving us room, or yeah, enough width to clean up this side before finishing things up. So let's get this done. Before we forget and lose this piece, we'll get our drill bit back in there. So yeah, before we do our other ones, what I may do is just drill this out to 14 and then just split these. But the next step, hopefully this is not too thin. It's not. And then the most difficult bit of all of this. And if anybody watching this has any suggestions on a better way to get this to line up so that we're running fairly true to the face, that'd be great. This time it ended up just kind of working out perfectly, luckily for me, but it doesn't always. And we just get in here and very carefully we will trim and true and face that off. Ideally we end up at like exactly 4 millimeters deep, which I think we are at. Yep, we're like just barely fitting in there. So that's perfect. You can make very, or pretty accurate pieces on a wood lathe. It just is a little fiddly. What we'll do next is get our wood ready, because we're actually almost ready to go on this body. Before I actually glue these up, I'm going to finish or get both of them all ready to go. But how this is going to work is that'll go on there. This will go on here. Another one of these will go on there. And then our wood will go the rest of this. So that little resin piece will keep our brass centered, we'll clamp everything so it keeps it all nice and tight. And then for this one, when we clamp it, I think what I'm going to do is clamp it with the mandrel inside the liner here. So I'll probably open up the hole at the end a little bit. I like to actually leave a little hole in the end of this for air to come through when we are gluing things up. That way, I've had a couple instances in the past where if I don't leave a little bit of a vent hole, then things will like to kind of explode as you compress that air in there. So I think we'll be good on this one. I'll go ahead and reset the camera again really quick just for ease of editing later, but we're going to go ahead and show you how I do the drilling on that, because I think I'm going to do a different method than I typically do for this particular one. So I will show you guys that in just one moment. I got a little cleanup to do on my brass bits here as well, so I'll catch you guys in a moment. Okay, so in the past, I've always taken the time to round out these blanks before cutting them up at all. However, with some recent builds, I've, well, not necessarily with recent builds, but with doing things this way, where I have everything already good to go for concentricity, if you will, on this, because this is going directly back on the mandrel and will be concentric. I don't need outside concentricity to ensure that I'm doing things properly, if you will, down inside here. So with this, we can actually leave this square, glue everything up, and then slap this back on the mandrel to true everything back down. So that is what we will be trying on this one. This is the first time that I've done that for, this is the second time overall that I'll have done something like that. So kind of a first try for this. If this does give me any issues, then I'll turn the other pieces around before moving on, but this shouldn't be a problem. And honestly, like, that's pretty damn nicely centered already. So let's start our drilling with let's do an 8mm bit. Let's go 8. And we're going to need to go about 60mm deep. Make sure that that's not going to be too deep on our wood. It's not. And mark it on our drill bit here, and we're going. Now, when I'm drilling wood blanks, I try to take it very, very, very slow at the start to try to get as centered as possible. The more off-center you are at the start, the more off-center you're going to be down at the other end. So we do want to be careful with this drilling. And we're just going to slowly drill this out with this 8mm until we hit that 60mm depth. Then we will probably go straight to a 10mm instead of jumping to 9 and get our max width full depth. And then we will probably just jump straight to 12 as well for the next step. Depending on how off-center things go, some like burl wood really likes to try to push the bit around. Depending on how off-center things are, I will go up in as little as like 0.5mm increments. The bits can be stiff enough sometimes that you can correct an off-center hole, especially as you start to get to those larger diameter bits. But yeah, we will just kind of slowly work this through. But I can feel that we really have no wobble in there. We are a very centered hole right now, which is exactly what you want. The grain is starting to push that bit a little bit in there, it feels like, so I am going to go back to locking it down. And if you've ever looked at my website and wondered why especially wood pens cost so much, this is the main reason. Wood generates a lot of heat while you're drilling, so you got to be slow with it. You got to clear chips frequently. You can probably see against the black of my smock and my shirt there a little bit of smoke coming off. When I pull that out. Now there are definitely quicker ways to get this stuff drilled out. Absolutely, I do not doubt that. This is, in my shop and my case, the most accurate way to do it, and I would rather be accurate for a final product than necessarily fast. So yeah, it's really the time and the care that I do try to put into these things that is why I generally charge a, not insignificant amount. The other nice thing about doing things this way as well will be it will be relatively easy to get our grain lined up. Alrighty. There's our 8mm hole to 60mm. I'm going to swap this out for a 10mm bit and go up to 60 as well. That'll be the max depth that we'll need for that. Clarify. And because we have that hole started already, the pilot, we will be turning this off before we put this back in. You see that smoke there as it melts this a little bit, so we're going to go ahead and hold off for a moment, let this cool down, and we'll be back to continue drilling. Right back at it. It's a little tight in there, we may need to... Yeah, lots of friction in there when you're drilling wood. Alrighty, that's as deep as we need to go with that guy. Next, let's swap to our 10mm bit. Or sorry, swap to our 12mm bit, and then figure out how deep we need to go with that guy. Not 60mm, that's for sure. We need to go closer to about 30. We'll go 35mm. That'll give us a little extra depth to allow for some glue to sit in this shoulder right here. And we're just going to increase the surface area that we have for glue adhesion. 35mm will be right. Alrighty, almost there. Yeah, we gave it like an extra 0.5mm or so. Nothing wrong with that. A little extra room for glue in there is never a bad thing. We're not going to be too close to 12mm on the outer diameter of this anytime in this area. I'll mostly get that towards the end out here, so we should be good. We'll just take our 10mm bit real quick and by hand just kind of maybe by hand. There you go. Just kind of clean up a little bit in there. And this should, yeah, so we're a little tight take those off so I don't cut myself. Yeah, so we're maybe a touch shallow here. Oh yeah. So we should be good. Wonder what we're doing. We may have some dust down in there. So what we want to do is make sure we remember which orientation we had this. I can't tell if there's a little dust stuck. Or if we just need to go a little deeper with our 10 mil bit. Alright, so I am going to go ahead and drill this just a touch deeper, both with this one, maybe another 0.5 millimeter, and then with the 10 millimeter again, just to make sure that I have enough room in there for glue and for this to sit down all the way and be properly seated. I'd rather have a little extra space than not quite enough. That should be good. That ought to be good. We'll just double check here. Yeah, we should be able to clamp that so everything is nice and tight. I do got to do a little bit of cleanup on my brasses still, but yep. We will clean out this guy and go get this glued up. And I'm going to go do another one of these afterwards. So, thank you for following along so far. I will catch you guys a little bit later for me in just a couple moments for you in order to go over working on probably our cap, I would imagine. So I'll catch you guys in just a little bit. Alrighty, and we are back to continue. So it is the next day. I didn't actually do any more work yesterday. My girlfriend's been feeling sick. Well, actually, my fiance now has been feeling sick. I proposed this morning and she said yes. So, woohoo! Exciting. But anyway, I was going to bed last night and I just had a feeling that I should look through my messages with one of these customers. And I'm glad that I did because I had forgotten that we had decided that we were going with nickel silver for the accents on one of these instead of brass. The other one is going to be brass. So I will be finishing this section at a later date and getting another one prepped and ready with likely this piece of aluminum on the section because the nickel silver is actually thicker than I would prefer. And just to keep things kind of proportional, this aluminum is the same thickness as the brass that I was using on the section. So we'll do the aluminum here. It's going to tarnish a little bit less than the nickel silver will in that kind of wet cap environment. But yeah, this should look different, but nice. So I was also giving it a think, and I was planning on filming making the caps. However, it is the exact same process as I used to make the body. I'm going to take a piece of Ebonite, I'm going to drill it and thread it as if I was just going to use that as the cap, and then I'm going to flip it around, put it on the mandrel, and I'm going to shape the outside in a similar fashion to what I've done for these body blanks. It'll just be different dimensions on those tenons there. So we'll do that. I'll get my rings ready and have all of that good to go by the next time that I check in with you guys for having these glued up and getting started with the shaping process and the inlay process, because that'll be a little bit more important than you guys watching for the second time me turn a bunch of Ebonite down and drill out some wood and whatnot. So the dimensions that I'll be going for this, for the thicker part, I'm going to have it at 14 millimeter diameter, and that's going to step down to a 12 millimeter outer diameter near the end. And for the depths of those, we will be going essentially the length of the entire section here of about 35 millimeters. So I'm going to investigate that and we'll get back to you. But basically this is about 35 millimeters. Ooh. Oh, okay, so this is about 35 millimeters. And then the nib itself extends about 25 millimeters from the section when it's done. I am going to have to face this off a little bit, so if we plan on going about 61 millimeters deep overall, we should have plenty of space inside the cap. And so I'm going to want a piece that's about 65 millimeters deep. Okay, this seems to be working. Good. So I'll cut a couple pieces that are 65 millimeters deep. I'm going to drill a 61 millimeter deep hole with 10 and then 12 millimeters. No, sorry, with 8 and then 10 millimeters. We'll have a 10 millimeter max inner diameter near the end. And then we're going to drill out with our 12.2 millimeter to do our threads. And we will also open the mouth of the cap up with 33/64 inch for about 2 millimeters or so to give us a touch of clearance for a shorter threading of the pen. So these should come out pretty solid, but I will catch back up with you guys here shortly after I get those prepped and get another section going for the white metal trim on this guy. So I will be back with you guys momentarily to talk about glue up and getting grain lined up and starting to shape things. Okay, it's actually been about a week since I saw you guys last. So a little bit of progress from the last time we checked in. I've got the caps all glued up. Like I said, it was the same process as for the bodies. So what I went ahead and did though is when I went to go glue up the cap, I had the body already glued up, and I just made sure that the two sides were aligned when I did this final cap glue up, so that at least on one of the thread leads you have a completely lined up blank. So the next step is going to be, I think, going through and finishing out the sections. I need to trim down the excess metal on these, as well as finish the drilling and threading on them. So I think we'll go ahead and start with that before we move on to doing the shaping on the bodies and whatnot. So one of the things I think I'm going to do for the rest of this quick session here of getting these guys going is we'll cut the camera here in just a moment, and then go ahead and do a time lapse. So I've got some laundry that I need to be running, and you guys don't need to listen to that in the background while I'm working on this stuff. So I'm going to time lapse this next bit, put a little bit of music over it, and you guys can kind of see what we're doing there. One of the things that I like to do for getting these sections back into the position that we want them in is making sure everything's clean when we get this reassembled. There we go. But then we'll go ahead and stick this guy in. And then what I'll usually do is, since currently I still have that 6 millimeter hole down the middle, we stick that guy back in there, and I'll do a little adjusting to make sure that this is not wobbling around at the end over here, so that we can get everything back in nice and straight. So we'll do a little bit of fiddling around with that here for a moment. Well, actually, maybe we won't. That looks pretty perfect right there. So we will leave that as it is, tighten this down, and get to work on getting these guys threaded and drilled the rest of the way out. So this particular one that I'm starting with the nickels, actually, no, this is aluminum accent. Aluminum's not my favorite thing to turn. It can be a little gummy, sticky on the tool. But yeah, we'll start with this one, and this guy is going to be the first time that I'll be using this nickel silver. So I'm curious to see how this turns. But I will catch back up with you guys to talk a little bit about things once we have this all finished up. Catch you soon. And that is 2 sections all ready to go. They're a touch different size, but each and every one of my pens is unique. I do try to keep things consistent as far as some of the dimensions go, but I am only human doing things by hand, and I can only be so accurate. So I do my best. These are within like 0.5 millimeter of each other, which, you know, for machining tolerances, that is a fair bit, 0.5 millimeter, but yeah, these are still going to be perfect. So let's see, next step is going to be probably getting our bodies trued down so that we can kind of get to actual like shaping. So yeah, let's start with bodies and go from there. Actually, let's start with the nickel silver, since I have not used that yet. See how that turns really quick. So body mandrels have a 5/8 inch shaft for the collet to hold on to. Right, so I think first things first, we'll face off this end with it just like this, so that we can get some tailstock support on here, and then we will start hitting those to get everything trued up, and we'll kind of see how this guy's going to be looking. I haven't seen this piece of wood round yet, so obviously you can tell it's still square. We'll want our face shield and mask for sure. I'm not somebody with a Ziricote or really like exotic wood sensitivity, but always good to protect your lungs, and then we'll have metal chips flying around here shortly, so always good to protect your eyes. Alright, so far, a little harder than brass, it feels like. Hotter chips coming off, but not too bad. This one will probably take a little bit longer than the brass to do. A lot of that's going to be, this is just thicker metal, so we have more material that we're removing overall. But yeah, we'll keep banging this out. I'm actually going to swap this over to a time lapse just because it's not going to be a whole lot of stopping and talking. I'm just going to go ahead and get these 2 bodies all roughed out and good to go, and we'll jump on to what I plan for like shaping. Alright, this is taking quite some time. I'm going to be having to stop and let this cool fairly periodically so that I don't completely ruin my glue joints. So I'm going to cut the camera and just get these all trued down off camera. The main thing that I think that I want to go over for the rest of this build so far is what I'm doing for the inlay here. So I'm going to get these at least trued down, if not just fully shaped up off camera. As you can see, I'm just taking very, very quick short passes across the metal to, slowly work this down. This might be the last time for quite a long time that I work with any nickel silver. This stuff is kind of a pain with my carbides. I don't have a good setup for sharpening high-speed steel yet. So yeah, the high-speed scale may make things a little bit quicker or easier for doing the metal here, but I don't have a setup for that at the moment. So I will catch back up with you guys when this is all shaped up and we are ready to do our inlaying. So catch you soon. Alrighty, I have all of our parts shaped out. We've got 2 caps and 2 bodies all ready for finishing up. Can't remember. These things change so much as you get into them that I don't remember which. Okay, that's how that one lines up. And then this one will line up as well. So what we're going to do here, hold on. Oh, perfect. Okay, so what we're going to do here is I'll show you guys on this cap how we're going to do this inlay, and then I'll go ahead and do everything else as I need to, just off camera. It's just a little bit easier not going through all 4 of these together. So what we are going to do first is take our nice thin parting tool. I'll quickly sharpen it up on my sharpening stone, just make sure I got a decent edge in there. We don't care what sort of surface we have down in there, because this is going to be covered up by our inlay material, which is just pre-stripped abalone. This is genuine abalone shell. It's just already cut to size. It also has a little adhesive backing on it, which makes it much easier to get into the channel there. Ideally, I would like to be able to just hand cut everything. I don't have a setup for doing that, or a good source for abalone shells that are of this quality, at least not at the moment. Anyway, what we'll do is we will use this parting tool to remove some of this resin between these rings, and that'll give us enough space to get this in there, and then we will backfill that with some CA glue. So let me put my mask on real quick and we can get started. My respirator. Okay, so that is currently approximately 1 millimeter deep, which should be fine for our purposes, because this this stuff is, before you take the backing off, about 0.37 millimeters, and I think the backing is probably about half of that. Not a third of that. So you're looking at 1/4 millimeter. This should be more than enough room for us to do our inlay. And then in between our guys here, we're actually at 3¼ millimeters. So we may have a little bit of a tight fit here, which should be okay. If we have to go trim this stuff before we get that in there, then that's what we gotta do. But our next order of business is to measure our diameter right here. We brought that to 14.48. Yeah, we'll call it 14.48 should be good. The actual is maybe like 14.45 or so. So what we'll do is plug that into our circumference calculator, because I don't do all of that math on my head, or in my head, and we'll come back and have a freshly cut piece of this ready to go. Alrighty, so we have our abalone strip cut to length, and ooh, luckily this is going to be actually a perfect fit in there. So that's excellent. Now, before we do that, I do want to clean some of this up and just get some of this dustiness sorted and taken care of. We mainly just want to be like reasonably dust-free here. We don't need to have a clean room by any means. And then I like having a popsicle stick so that I can use it to kind of carefully roll on the abalone. And this stuff is fragile. It will crack, and it will kind of break as you roll it around the piece here. So what we're going to do is very carefully split this backing off if we can. There we go. Okay. And I don't like to pull the backing entirely off the piece at first. I like to pull it back a little ways to expose some of that stickiness and then get that first bit pressed on to start to adhere. And I think this is like a somewhat pressure sensitive adhesive. I don't know for sure, but it does feel like it takes a moment of holding it to get it to set. And part of the reason that we do give that extra room for, this is a millimeter deep hole right now. Part of the reason for that is this stuff does like to try to stay straight. And so it'll break and you'll kind of have a ring of straightish pieces, kind of like a segmented bowl or something before you turn it. And we just slowly, carefully. Now, one of the things I think I did mess up on this when calculating how long it needed to be was not accounting for the extra little bit of width that the material itself adds. Which means sometimes you can end up with a little sliver right at the end where it doesn't quite meet up all the way, and we did indeed run into that. So I am going to go cut a little teeny tiny little piece to insert into that little slot. I'll be right back. Okay, so I don't know if you guys can see this from there. That is the size of the piece that I need to fit in there. I already have it kind of split on from the backing on the end of the knife there. And we are going to very carefully with our tweezers okay, there we go. Whew. All right, everything there looks all well adhered. Perfect. So next what we're going to do is, ideally, hold on. We're going to kind of very carefully sort of agitate off any dust that we see there and give this a very quick coat of thin CA to seal it in. Then we'll go ahead and start actually filling our channel. So my favorite way to do this with this particular lathe one spot that's coming up. All right, we will quickly get this set there, and we're just going to add a little layer in there. And I will be using activator for some of this. We'll be using both thin, medium, and activator for all of this. For this first coat, I really like to just put it on and let it cure by itself with it running at a slow speed, like with the lathe running at a slow speed like this. That'll give it a nice evenness, and it's going to keep things from getting cloudy, ideally. Sometimes stuff happens, but yeah, for right now, this should be good. We're going to give this probably like 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes to sit and chill, and then we'll start filling this in with coats of medium with activator to speed things up. All right, this first layer is all cured. So we'll move on to our next ones, and it'll be the same deal. We're just going to be getting a little CA in there. Okay, so we'll take our CA glue and we'll just get a small coat or a thin coat in there and give it a moment to kind of even out, and then I usually do 3 or 4 sprays from about this far away just to kind of mist it. And then we'll give it a moment to settle. Let some of that aerosol continue to evaporate before we try to put on our next coat. And ideally, doing it this way and kind of slowly building these coats with the backfill, we should be able to get a nice, clear, consistent amount of CA in there. So you don't have any, voids, bubbles in there. You don't have any little white streaks and spots. And for right now, what we're going to do is probably 2 more coats. 1 more is going to fill this just about even with the surface that we currently have. And then the next coat after that's going to bring it a little proud. And then what we'll do is let this sit for probably 30 minutes or so, just to make sure that everything is fully cured. And then move on to evening that out and doing our final shaping sanding before we apply the CA finish that will be over the rest of this piece. Yeah, we're looking good so far. One of the ways that I've found that you can kind of tell if it's cured or still curing is by looking at how shiny the surface of the CA is. You can see that it's, gone from quite glossy to very uneven looking with the way that it's reflecting light. Then I found usually you can tell if it's fully cured or not. The super glossy CA is going to look the super glossy CA look is going to be uncured, and then when it starts to get that kind of knobbly appearance, it'll be cured up. So I usually try to wait. Once I get to this point, I do try to wait until I see everything being sort of consistently inconsistent with the surface. Right now there's a couple spots of uncured, it looks like. Yeah, there was a little bit of uncured CA there still. So, because I touched some uncured stuff, we need to carefully look at where that was and see if there's any white haze forming. Does not look like it. So we'll just keep this running, give it another few spritzes of activator just to make sure that this one is set before we put on our last coat. We could probably be fine now, but what I've run into in the past issues wise with like stopping now where I'm like maybe just proud is sometimes there's a little area where it's not quite high enough. And so doing that last extra coat just to make sure you've got that extra little bit is definitely worth it. And this one we'll give it a little, I put kind of extra on than I really needed to for this one as well. So we'll give this a moment extra to cure itself before we start to spray it with our activator. Doing this part is a little bit different from doing like a CA finish, where you're wiping on a super thin layer, setting it with the activator, and then rinsing and repeating. This one is a little bit more weighting involved overall. We will be doing a CA finish on this pen, and I'll show you guys how I do those. It's pretty standard as far as a CA finish goes. I use probably 5 to 8 or so, maybe 10 coats of thin, which I am getting a little low on. I should have plenty to do this set of pens, but I use 5 to 10 coats of thin, followed by probably at least 5 coats of medium, just to build up a good amount, and then we sand that back till it's even and give it a nice polish. All right, so this guy is good to go. I'm gonna let it sit for another half hour or so before we come back and start doing the, call it true up, if you will. We'll flush this down and give this a sand. And we will be doing 2 kind of like full polishings with this. We'll do a full polish with out anything on the wood, and then we're going to come back through and do a CA finish on this. All right, yeah, the surface is fully cured. We're going to let this sit for about half an hour before we turn into it. I've had some issues in the past with starting immediately after this is feeling good and having some, you know, uncured glue down into it. So we're going to give this a little bit to just kind of hang out and do its thing and cure up, and we'll come back and continue. Okie dokie, so this should be all cured up, and we are going to flush this up, do a little bit of sanding, maybe one. I'm always a little hesitant on that one last pass, but we'll at least get this flushed up and get this sanded up, parted off, polished for the first time. Generally, for something like this, I like to do a 2-stage polish. Even though I will be doing a CA finish on this wood, I'm still going to give it a full sand and at least most of the polish that I would give the CA and this Ebonite. The main reason is I want to get these rings nice and polished before I put a CA finish on, because I am going to bring that CA finish at least up to the edge of this second ring here. I don't usually do the CA over the Ebonite, because if you don't have full coverage, it looks different. It's got a slightly different sheen to it. But we'll at least bring the CA up to this, or the CA finish up past this first ring here, so that we have good coverage of everything. So let's move on with that. So I do appear to actually have some bubbles, which brings us to a debate point. Do we just fill the bubbles that are at the surface with our thin CA when we do our CA finish? Or do we try to turn some of this back a little bit and go back in with the thin CA for all of our backfilling? It's kind of a tough choice, because the craftsman and artisan in me says no bubbles. in the inlay. The practical, time-sensitive side of me says they're very tough to avoid altogether. We can embrace the wabi-sabi. That feels like a cop-out. Here's what we'll do, I think, is we'll give this a quick wipe with some isopropyl, just to get any dust out. And we'll give this one quick coat with Thin CA just to seal those a little bit, or a couple quick coats of Thin CA just to seal those really quick, and then see how that looks. If I'm not happy with that, then we will turn some of this backfill back out and try it again. The kind of sketchy part about doing that is if we go a little bit too deep and we hit that abalone, we are just going to have to turn all the way through that and call that a day. Start over from scratch. I have plenty of material to do that, so if we have to, we will. But ideally, we do not have to. So, give this a quick wipe with some ISO and give it a little bit of thin to kind of fill those little voids that we somehow got in there. And you know, things happen. We try our best to avoid that, but there's only so much you can do sometimes. So, but I generally prefer. So what I'll usually do in a situation like this is just let one drop kind of spread its way across. We'll let this cure up. This is quite a thin layer of glue that we just added, so we will give it just another moment to fully cure. Okay, I think that's actually going to look pretty good. There's a bubble or two, but it should be minor enough that that's not going to cause us issues. So, our next step is going to be parting this off actually. So let's get a measurement for this cap. Overall, I want to keep this quite a long pen. I think we're going to go for a 75 millimeter cap. Actually, I'm pretty sure I have 61 millimeters deep in this die. But no, we're going to go for an 80 millimeter cap just to make sure that we have enough space here. 80 millimeters should be just fine. It will make this quite a long pen when it's capped, but this is going to be a statement piece, so. Now, if you're wondering, Reese, is that not going to be a... If you're wondering, Reese, is that not going to be a really long section or a really long cap for how long that pen is? And yeah, the nib's probably going to come to about here inside. Nope. Yeah, around about there. So we do have some extra space in there, but this is such a beautiful wood, and I do like a longer cap overall. So yeah, this will be similar to the original design for this pen, which had quite a long cap. Next up, we'll be doing some sanding. For this, we'll be using mineral oil as a lubricant. And for round one, we'll be using just regular wet dry sandpaper. This is 600, 1000, 2000, 5000, 7000, and 10,000. And most of this is going to be for kind of shaping and final shaping, and then just refining the surface of this wood so that it's already nice and smooth before we put that CA finish on. And then this will also get our ebonite and our metal rings here all nice and shiny. So let's go get on with that. We usually do this at around like 750 to 800 RPM. Get a good amount of oil on there. For the 600, I'm mainly focusing on the wood and kind of some final shaping. I want to be light with it because it does leave some fairly deep scratches that can be a little hard to remove if you're a little too aggressive with it. And we are going to periodically give this a wipe with a cloth just to remove that excess. You can still see where it's a little uneven over here. We haven't quite hit a couple spots, so. And then you can usually add a little teeny bit extra oil when you come back to hit it just to kind of loosen things up. The one issue that I've found with using oil as a sanding lube is it just creates this thick, pasty slurry instead of really evacuating that swarf. So it can be a little inconsistent sometimes in how the paper cuts. It's feeling pretty solid so far. Yeah, that inlay's looking okay. And you can kind of see now what sort of this wood is going to look like a little bit. Once we get the CA on there, it is going to be a little darker overall. A lot of that is going to be, especially on camera, due to the fact that the CA finish is just going to be reflecting a lot of the light, so you're not going to see that dark wood underneath. But we seem to have a pretty consistent scratch pattern everywhere. So we'll move on to our 1000. Both the 600 and the 1000 papers can remove material pretty quickly. So you do want to be fairly careful. And especially on the ebonite, I try to have as light a touch as possible. I don't currently have a buffing setup. I really do need to get one of those going. So I am kind of stuck with polishing compounds and whatnot, which have been working really well for me so far. But yeah, I do plan on getting, along with a high-speed steel sharpening setup, a buffing system too. Still seeing some kind of heavy scratches on the ebonite over here, so I'm going to give this a little extra oil and a little extra attention. The other downside to using oil as a lube is it's just very messy. It doesn't dry ever, or at least using mineral oil as a lube. We're looking and feeling pretty good there. Move on to 2000. We're just going to keep at this for a little while. So I'll kind of check back with you guys here. We'll be fast forwarding through a lot of this, but I'll check back with you guys here if there's anything important to discuss or new to report. Alrighty. That is looking pretty good already. Move on to the 5K. Alrighty, look at that. That is looking fantastic. What we're going to do is give this a good wipe down with isopropyl. Now, isopropyl alcohol, not great for exposing ebonite to much. For just this quick little wipe to get this oil off, it's not too bad. But it will hasten the oxidation of it. So I do give it just a quick, but then I try to just keep it to the rest. That kind of extra stripping. Awesome. So, sorry if you see my belly there, but that strips that oil from the wood and gives us a good base for our CA to adhere to. I've heard a lot of people, or not a lot necessarily, but I've heard folks say don't polish this high for doing wood finishes, and it depends on the finish. If you're doing a penetrating finish like a tongue oil or something like that, correct, do not go this high. But for a pure film finish like a CA like this I have found is perfectly fine and will get you good results. So what we will do next is our quick little CA finish. Show you guys how I do that, and then probably call that good on shooting until I finish the rest of this stuff. The sections themselves, it's just your standard shape down, nothing much special about that. For everything else, it'll be the exact same process as you've watched here, so not a whole lot to, a whole lot new going on in that. So what we will do though is once again put down a little piece of paper to protect our lathe bed from glue. Get things wiped, and then need to prep some paper towel. I found that these blue towels are really good for CA finishes. They hold together well and they don't activate the CA quite as quickly as a standard paper towel does. And then I like to wear one of these little finger condoms, as I like to call them, condoms, so that I don't get any CA on my fingers if it goes all the way through. And we're going to turn this on to, currently it's at like 200 RPM. We'll put this against our piece. And yeah, you can see that that does go pretty quickly through that. I'm going to set that there. Give that a little spritz with our accelerator. I do like to hit my rag with accelerator as well, and you do have to be careful. This amount on this rag is going to get really hot and it will flash. Here you may see some smoke come up, but I'm going to go ahead and put my respirator on to protect my lungs and keep going. That's coat number one. That'll be coat number one for our CA. We're going to do at least 5 coats of thin and then 5 coats at least of medium. Gotta make sure we're still recording. I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but there's a little bit of CA that got onto the Ebonite here. We'll be sanding that back again. Generally, when I do something kind of split like this, I'll be sanding as well as I can, keeping anything from hitting the Ebonite until I start to hit that higher level grit, to where I'm not putting too big or too deep of scratches into this already polished surface, because that's actually a pretty nice scratch-free surface at the moment. One area that you want to try to pool a little bit extra if you can is right at this, kind of corner. It's really easy to burn through that spot. So I try to leave a little extra in those areas if I am able to. And as I stop and look at this, I can kind of see where the grain lines are still showing. This is a fairly open grain wood as far as these denser exotics go. And so this has a fair bit to fill. At this point, we've probably filled things enough that if we sand this back, it'll be even. But we're going to do 2 more coats of this thin and another 5 coats of the medium just to make sure. Better to have extra and not burn through than burn through and have to redo a finish. A lot of the time I won't be fully redoing a finish. I'll just be partially redoing one spot, but it makes it a little bit more difficult to even things out sometimes. Yeah, this is pretty well filled in already. Give it one more thin. Alright, once we've gotten to about this point with one of these, I usually just throw it away because there's not a whole lot of room. You do want to wait until things are mostly cured before you toss it into the trash, because those will get hot as they finish curing. Give this another moment. Where did I put my... There you go. The medium stuff is really what fills in those last little bits of, leftover crevice. The thin really does get down into that wood, so it leaves evidence of those grain lines for quite a while. I think we're actually only going to do 3 coats of the medium. We're actually looking really, really good already as far as layer thickness and everything goes. So luckily we're likely going to be wanting to sand through that a little bit anyway. I touched a wet spot. You do have to give the medium a little bit longer to cure than the... We are going to stop and just make sure that there's nothing super gross looking there. And there's not. So we are going to do one last coat of medium here, and then do our final sand and polish on this cap. The biggest thing I've found to avoid hazing and stuff like that for your CA finish, or at least for me, is just ensuring that I'm spraying from far enough away and giving it short bursts. Yeah, this is a really cool piece of wood. Alright. Okay, so I think we're going to go ahead and I'm going to reset the camera and the recording and get some new water, and then we'll jump into getting this guy sanded all up. So I am going to start with 600 again, but that's mainly going to be removing a lot of what we just put on. I'm going to be doing my very, very best not to actually touch the ebonite here. I may not even come very far into the inlay area right there. But we'll turn this up from 200 to 700. I do have some stuff to smooth and remove down on this end, but we're going to do that with the higher grits. Now, one of the areas that I really want to focus on is this end here, because I've kind of gone from a cone to a little bit more of a very rounded cone. So and I found you do want to use this lowest grit, whatever you do want to end up starting with, for enough time that you do feel everything smooth. And periodically we'll stop and take a look. So you can kind of see right here there's a few shiny spots. That's areas where we have not gotten down far enough to start affecting the CA with our sandpaper. One thing that I think I do want to do really quick too is actually grab one of my little files, or this big file, and maybe see about flattening this side. I would generally prefer to avoid using something kind of, this aggressive, but we have a fair bit of material that we can lose, and I do want to flatten this out so that we do have a nice kind of, cone. Do a couple more passes doing it this way. And yeah, you do want to stop and check periodically and make sure that you don't look like you are burning through that finish. So it does not appear that we are, so we'll move back to our paper. Alrighty. Actually looking pretty good there. I'm going to hit the end a little bit more with this 600, and then we'll move on to our 1000. Okay, I was having a little bit of a hard time determining if this was wood or not. It is wood. So we need quite a bit more on the end here. So we'll grab our finger cot and some more of this and get things going. And yeah, this is why I like to stop periodically and check things, because if we had gotten all the way through polishing before stopping and looking at that, it would have been really annoying. Alrighty. Now, next step, I think let's give this a McGuire's Plastics. Give this a good shine, and then we'll show you guys. Alrighty. I think we can actually call that just about done. For this cap at least. This is looking quite good. So I'm gonna go toss this upstairs and finish the rest of these. I will check back in with you guys once the rest of this is done and we're ready to show off the final finished pens. But this first one is looking really good so far. So thanks for tuning in so far. Catch back up with you guys shortly. And yeah, this is going to be a pretty good finale, if I do say so myself. Alrighty. Well, we are back with the 2 finished pens. Ooh. Try not to throw things around with my poor grip with these gloves on. But you can see we've got these guys all done up. A nice glossy CA finish on the wood. The metal is looking very nice. And I gotta say, that Abalone inlay comes out beautifully, especially done this way with that easy inlay. I think it's easy inlay. I got this particular batch from Turner's Warehouse, so they might get their own stuff there. But yeah, I'm really happy with how these came out. I have not put nibs in them yet. I do know what the owners of these would like, but yeah, we'll get those put in tomorrow before we get them shipped out. But these are some extremely beautiful pieces. I'm very happy with how not only these two, but the original kind of inspiration for this commission set was. These are going to 2 separate people, but yeah, I'm very happy with both these pieces of wood and the pairings with the Ebonite and the Abalone. And then in the case of this one, nickel silver, which was not terribly fun to work with, I gotta say. So we will probably hold off on that for a little while. And then on this one, it is just some brass, which is a dream to work with. So we'll be continuing to work with that a lot more in the future. So if there's anything that I've missed, because they're, you know, knowing me, most likely is, then let me know and I can answer questions in the comments. If you had fun with this, just give it a thumbs up. That's always a good thing. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. In case you're curious about kind of how big these pens are, this here is a Sailor King of Pen. So as you can see, they are both a little bit longer. But not quite as wide overall. And then if we look at the uncapped comparison here, we're looking at, you know, just some slight differences overall. The King of Pen is going to be just a bit shorter when you go from the end of the section to the end of the body. Overall, it's going to be, you know, a teensy bit shorter. The nib is longer on that. But yeah, this will be, I think, some really fun to write with pieces for the recipients. So I'm really happy to get these ones done and be able to see them in their final form. So thank you guys for joining along on this ride. Like I said, if there was anything you had questions about, or if there were any things that I missed explaining or going over, just let me know, and I am more than happy to answer questions. So we will catch you next time. Peace.